And welcome back to the episode of Geek Centurions, me, boy, Eli.
Hey Joe.
And we're going to be talking about some gaming today. By the way, we did see Mortal Kombat 2. Solid.
Yeah, it's definitely better than the first one.
Yeah.
We won't make an in-depth review of that just because
Yeah.
ultimately it's better than the first one. Just to summarize it,
Yeah.
better than the first one. Not the best Mortal Kombat movie is still the original.
I just feel like we had to say it at least because it came out, but we didn't have time to record. So we're gonna be talking about some gaming stuff, specifically the indie watching stuff. But before we get to that, just letting all you guys know that we will be at Palooza next week, live on Friday at 3:15 at the Podcast Pavilion. Be sure to check us out. Come join on our conversations. We're gonna be talking about some comic book crossovers, not just between Marvel and DC, but some random stuff.
Yeah, the history of comic book crossovers is weird to say the least. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be fun discussing some of that stuff.
Yeah, no, and I will say we will be mentioning that one time they had Attack on Titan in Marvel.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna be learning some stuff
Yeah.
there too.
Oh, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, there's some weird ones out there.
I mean, there was, and I know it's still comics, but Archie and Alien, that was a thing, right?
You're thinking Predator.
Predator, alright, yeah.
So be sure to check us out, because Joe has not caught up with all these, so his reactions are going to be the key thing to see.
I feel like that's probably the biggest thing we ever do with those things, is just me going like, what are we talking about? What is going on?
Who is this man?
Yeah, but anyways, yeah, so you brought it up. There's been a recent discussion going around ever since the release of Mixtape, this video game that's sort of supposed to be a nostalgic look back at, like, I guess the 80s, 90s time, right?
Yeah.
Like, just a bunch of kids just living in the suburbs.
Skating,
Yeah.
mixtapes,
Yeah.
hence the name.
Yeah, like all that stuff.
Which is funny, because the one thing I've heard was like, yeah, these kids, whoever made this did not grow up in that era, because they were doing things like, no one did that, or...
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of criticism for that game. I think, honestly, from what I've seen, it just seems like a kind of like an okay game that I think a lot of people have put a little too much weight into. And I think part of that is in terms of how a lot, it's like it's being, it's an indie game, right? It's not coming out from like one of our big studios, right? Like your EAs, your Activisions, your Ubisofts,
your
right?
Capcoms,
your Capcoms, right? Like all your big name publishers, right? Like, and so people are like, yeah, the indie games have been going on the rise and stuff. But, there are some people that are kind of like, well, is this really an indie game, though? Because, from what I understand, I believe the publisher for this game is actually Annapurna Interactive, which is a subsidiary of the Annapurna Pictures, I believe, which is a film studio. So they have some Hollywood backing money behind them, right?
Yeah.
And they've been able to, I think Mixtape does have a bunch of licensed music in it, which, seems a little bit antithetical to being an indie game, because I don't think, there aren't a whole lot of indie games on the top of my brain that are able to have the money or budget to use, like, licensed music and stuff from, like, actual artists, and, so it's an interesting discussion. I mean, it's even been brought up to, for Expedition 33, which, obviously was huge last year. I haven't finished yet, but from what I've played, I like it. It seems like a fun game. Very interesting RPG.
I enjoyed the hell out of it.
I know. Yeah, I heard you talk about how good the game is, but there are people out there that are kind of like, is it really an indie game?
Yeah,
though?
and this is kind of why I want to discuss, because I immediately thought of the Expedition 33. One of the couple of debacles they've had, aside from like the supposed use of AI. I say supposed because I've not caught up on that, so I'm using supposed because I'm not 100%.
Allegedly, right?
Yeah, I'm not fully, I'm just putting this out there, not fully. I don't know much of it, so I'm not gonna talk like I know it is. So I'm gonna put like a little asterisk on it. If anyone wants to say like, update me, thank you, please. I would pretty much like that. So because they had the award show, the Game Awards, where they won, Game of the Year.
And, it was
well deserved.
Yeah. There was a lot of winning awards for Expedition 33, right?
Yeah.
Like they won a huge chunk of awards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of labeled as like a big win for indie games, right? yeah, there's a lot of big discussion or like a hoopla about like, is it an indie game though? Because how many people worked on that game? Like 100 at least.
33.
33. Yeah, right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's more sort of like they're all like former like
Ubisoft devs.
Ubisoft devs and stuff like that.
They had like the experience. They had the backings. So it was kind of like, do we consider this indie? Even though they did win the indie award for that year, and it's if for me specifically, I say yes because just because they have experience doesn't mean they have that full all that backing that they.
Yeah, I would say honestly, like what I think a lot of when it comes to indie games, a lot of people sort of perceive it as like a one man or like a very small group of people. Like
Mm-hmm.
33 is small, but like I think of something like Five Nights at Freddy's, right? Made by one guy, Scott Cawthon, right? Or like like there's a lot of stuff like that. I mean, in Minecraft was long time considered like an indie game, right? Made by Notch and like a small group of people, and then eventually it became so freaking big that it sort of no longer indie.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably going to happen with a company like well, I don't remember the actual company that made Expedition 33, but the people Sandfall, yeah, Sandfall Interactive, yeah. So I feel like they like where they're at right now, and I think where they will go with the games they'll make eventually, right? Like any future games. I would agree that like releasing Expedition 33 and the way they did it, probably I would consider them at least indie. But I think afterwards, the best I could say for them would be like a double A studio, right?
Yeah.
Which I feel like is something that's I guess sorely lacking, I guess, in gaming when you think about it, right? Because
Yeah.
again, we have our big publishers that are all basically like triple A gaming studios, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what we consider like the like triple A, right? But there isn't a whole lot of like in between, I guess, when you think about it, because it's like usually when people talk about games, it's like either the big AAA games, your Call of Duties, your GTA's, all that stuff, and then you got just random indie games and stuff. I mean, granted, there's still a good chunk of like interesting indie games out there. I'm trying to think of all the random. I mean, Among Us, obviously.
Among Us, Hades.
Yeah, Hades 1 and 2.
Would you consider Hades 2 indie still? Cause
I guess so. Because ultimately, I guess it just sort of yeah. Because I think we have to. I guess part of the problem is we have to really sort of define what we have to consider as an indie game, right?
Yeah.
At this point, considering how much influence and like recognition a lot of these indie games are starting to get, like I'm trying to. I think it's just it usually sort of people sort of look at it as like sort of smaller, well-known studios being able to pump out stuff without like a major publisher backing them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sort of generally how it is. Like I think like Shovel Knight to me and like all the shovel and all the games that that whole team has made, I would still consider indie games, right? Like, and, there's because I think at the end of the day, like they still because that was a Kickstarter game too, wasn't it? Shovel Knight, yeah,
that was a Kickstarter game.
Yeah, like I think that sort of stuff kind of leans into that indie game stuff as well because it's like crowdsourced and like you have your early access games that I would consider probably indie games because wasn't I think there was at least one game off the top of my head wasn't I think it was Ark. I think Ark Survival Evolved. The one where you're like kind of like a base builder, but you're with dinosaurs and stuff. I think I remember correctly.
Didn't they use AI in one of their?
I think they probably did eventually because they had made some newer stuff. They had the whole animated show. I think was it Vin Diesel in there or was it something else? Cause
I know what you're talking about, but it wasn't Vin. I don't think it was Vin Diesel.
Okay.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
No, it wouldn't surprise me either. But no, you are right because that that for small studios they definitely seem to be more inclined to try to manage AI in that way, right? Or AI generated content in that way.
But would you consider them indie now? Because Ark's been out for like years.
Maybe. No, I mean, if anything, I would probably say the guys behind Ark probably are reaching the double A status in my opinion.
Yeah.
simply because like if you're making deals with like Vin Diesel, like you're no longer like an indie game.
Yeah.
That's probably my opinion, right?
So in that case, I think it's just kind of if I were to say like my definitive is like you, it's a game that has indie game has to be a game that is done by a small group of people with who dang I'm losing the sauce here. But that's because like I'm really what's stopping me is the money situation, right? Because if you have a lot of money, then are you independent or
Yeah, I mean it's interesting too because
because a publisher is just someone who's going to publish a game.
yeah, like Deep Silver is probably one I can think of, right? Because didn't they publish Mighty Number Nine,
Mm-hmm.
right? That infamous like crying like an anime fan on prom night. You remember that trailer?
Oh God.
Yeah, it's a funny trailer. Yeah, because Mighty Number Nine was kickstarted. Yeah, you can consider that whole journey as an indie game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like a trying to like have a spiritual successor to Mega Man, right? But then they needed a publisher to sort of get the game out, and I think that's probably part of the reason what makes an indie game an indie game. Like it's sort of self-published, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have like a third party like sending the game out to like distributors and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So would you say an indie game needs a, would be considered an indie game if it's self-published, or it could still be considered indie if it has a publisher?
I think both. Like one, it's like a square is a rectangle, and a rectangle is not a square scenario to me, right? Like so I think you can be an indie and still have a publisher, cause gosh, I'm trying to remember.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking of it like if you're a book author, right?
Yeah,
Because you
yeah,
can
yeah.
self-publish a book.
Yeah, but then you can also just have like a larger publishing company, do the publishing
Granted,
for you.
what is an indie? A larger publisher, right?
Yeah.
Because was it Kepler? Kepler was the one that published Expedition 33, and they kind of like publish smaller games, if I recall.
Right.
So like technically you can consider it as like an indie game. So it's an interesting conversation because at that point we're just essentially talking about like what is what can be an indie game, what can't be. Obviously, if you are backed by a major group, it's not. I wouldn't consider it indie. At best, like you said, double A.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Annapurna like Interactive is
And I've
like
played some of their games too.
yeah, I was gonna say because I'm pretty sure they made Stray, which is the game where you play as that cat,
Yeah.
right? I believe they also did the Outer Wilds. I believe was one of the other ones they've.
Did he Outer Wilds?
It's
Or am I thinking of Outer Worlds?
no, I mean here's the thing, like they're publishers, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? You're thinking Outer Worlds, I think, because Outer
Yeah.
Wilds is a bit more of like a
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, yeah. You're
yeah.
looking it up. Are you?
Yeah, I'm looking everything up. Wait, oh right, they did do Journey.
Oh,
They
right.
published Journey.
Journey is a hell of an indie game, though.
Yeah, so
Like that is well, double A is probably the better.
yeah, I guess cause I'm pretty sure cause there was the one I think I remember you played 12 minutes. You remember that one? It was like the time loop one.
I did not play that game.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, you're thinking of The Artful Escape.
That okay, all right. But no, that was that one game where it's just a dude in like trapped in like a 12-second loop. It's all in like a white room. He's with his wife and like a dude comes in.
Yeah,
It's
you
like
have
that, you're reliving the same 12 seconds. You're trying to do all these sort of different things to get different outcomes and stuff.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I remember that. And honestly, the biggest thing about that was probably the big name actors in that because it was Willem Dafoe, um, Professor X, not Patrick Stewart, the other guy, James McAvoy.
Yeah, James McAvoy. Yeah.
And Daisy Ridley. That's the thing I always remember about that game because I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. These are very good actors. And then I think I heard about the plot twist, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not playing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was leading up to like I'm pretty sure there was a major plot twist. I think I know what it is, but I'm not gonna say it just because I'd rather not. Let's just
like you have no confirmation if this is true or not.
Well, I think I know it's true. I think that's just a little weird, right? Somebody
Tis silly.
somebody needed to really get the editor to fix
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, no. So yeah, they've done a lot. I think it's interesting. Like it's come up to a point where they are publishing these games by people, and only now is it sort of like, hey, is this even an indie game? Is Mixtape an indie game? Like
You're right, because like even 12 seconds, right?
12 minutes.
12 minutes. Um, even then, that one has big name voice actor.
Big name
big name
actors.
actors, yeah.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're willing to go for anything. I don't know what time frame that came out for Daisy Ridley. Then again, I don't really see her much in movies, so I don't know where she's standing in her. I hope she's doing great. Hoping great things for her. Don't get me wrong. Uh, but still, that's like a lot. And think about it now. Expedition 3 has Charlie Cox, who was going to be at Palooza this year.
Well, yeah. I mean, granted, Charlie Cox, I wouldn't say is like a big name actor, but obviously being Daredevil in the MCU probably gives you a lot of credibility, right?
Oh yeah, he was in a lot of shit, but that was the one that like really launched him. And by say really launched him, I was like he became well known.
Yeah.
But like I haven't seen him in anything else. I think aside from this one and Expedition 33, Daredevil and Expedition 33. I think that's the only ones I've seen him be like well known for.
Mhm.
Which is he needs to play that game, man. I swear. Or just sit down with his kids
Yeah.
and play the game.
Yeah. 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 So it is just sort of kind of interesting, like now looking at like just what Annapurna Interactive has published and seeing like there's a lot of games here that I think people didn't really seem to mind and were perfectly fine. They're just calling it indie games, but only with Mixtape. And I think it's just part of it is just sort of like the amount of, I guess, money behind it in terms of
Yeah.
like access to licensed music and like, I know there are like some reviews. I think IGN gave it a 10 out of 10. Is that am I? Oh, I can look it up right now. But a lot of people sort of going like just like, all right, that's a little maybe
Yeah, yeah.
much, right?
Especially when it comes to licensing music, that becomes a sort of a difficulty.
But yeah, no, I think that's part of the, I guess, the problem. I mean, it's kind of interesting just to sort of see how that sort of entails with like the I guess the benefits of being an indie game. I guess sort of.
Yeah, because your cost really isn't going to be much. Maybe you could probably like if you're associated with the thing is you're associated with a big group, so it's kind of like how much are you given and how much are you willing to do.
Yeah, and I think that's probably gonna be the interesting factor because again, Annapurna is publishing the game. They're not the developers, and the actual developers, probably don't see as much success unless it's published. I think that's the ultimate thing too when you think about it of just like when it comes to being an indie game, right? Like, is it really just dependent on how like on your publisher, right? Or like you're pushing it out and stuff. I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, I think it's sort of I don't want to say a nothing burger, but just from what I've seen of Mixtape, it looks all right. Like it's ultimately like seems like a game just sort of built on nostalgia, right? Like it seems like pretty much like a John Hughes movie, but you can play through it or whatever, right? Something along that lines. And it's like, yeah, sure, if you're into John Hughes movies, like Breakfast Club.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, about
16 Candles.
Yeah. So I mean, which is fine. Those are solid movies, but also they sort of evocative of their times, right? If you're, for probably some people, it's like, yeah, this does feel like a nice sort of nostalgic take, and probably for me, I'm just like, cool. I'm just not gonna play it.
As someone who grew up around that time frame,
Well, I mean, yeah, like I think our version of the '90s is a lot different from, say, Mixtape's version of the '90s.
well, yeah, we were born in like the mid '90s.
Yeah, so but my point still stands, right?
Yeah, it's also funny because the first thing I saw like as a, I wouldn't say as a criticism, but more like a nitpick, was the how they rewinded a cassette.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember hearing something about that. It's just like, yeah.
I'm like, okay, as someone who did own cassettes, I've never done that in my life. I didn't know there was a tool for it, or is there a tool?
Yeah, I just assumed you just have to, spin the wheel back.
Yeah.
I mean, I know video tapes. You would have like an actual thing. You put it in, and the button. You would put in like a thing, press the button, and it just rewinds it for you.
Yeah. You also had like the actual just press the button on the VCR tape.
Yeah, that too. Just rewind and I'll just that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if it was a cassette, I would just use my finger.
Yeah, that's what I was saying too. With a cassette, I think couldn't you just use your finger to just swirl the wheel around until it's wrapped back up? Who knows? But yeah, it's just kind of an interesting, like I said, it's an interesting discussion of like, is there such are we experiencing some sort of like indie washing debate, right? Of like, are these games that count themselves as indies, but then when you kind of like look under the covers, they actually have a lot more backing than a normal indie game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. At the end of the day, I think it's sort of it is sort of starting to become a bit more difficult, I guess, for people to just discern what an indie game actually is.
Yeah.
Right. If we consider the because we were talking about it earlier, right? We were just like trying to figure out like what do we consider as an indie game? Is this an indie game or is this an indie publisher? Like
it ultimately comes down to your preference as a gamer, right?
I think so. It definitely starts to seem like it's more like vibes based for some people. Like again, Five Nights at Freddy's, right? That those are indie games, right? I think some of the newer ones, like what was it? Not Sister Location, the other one. I think because that one came out on like PlayStation, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah, that one I wouldn't consider that indie.
Like at the very least, that's probably more like double A,
yeah.
or maybe I guess I'll coin it because I don't think anybody says it. Like single A, right?
Yeah.
Of gaming, because I mean it doesn't look like the budget of a AAA game, but it clearly is way more. Has way more stuff in it than say the original Five Nights, which is just you're in a single room and you're just watching a bunch of cameras, waiting for the animatronics to show up or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's also a thing. Like it's the simplicity of a gameplay.
Yeah, I guess so. Because I mean, most of I think.
But then at the same time, you can't really count that for some games.
Yeah, because I guess originally Minecraft obviously was just like a you just
blocks together.
You just do stuff, and then slowly they added updates like having the mobs and stuff, like the animals, the creepers, the monsters, and then eventually it's kind of all over the place now. Now, God, I don't even know how much weird stuff is in Minecraft nowadays, but it's a lot. If the Minecraft movie is anything to go by.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that is sort of an interesting sort of thing when it comes to like indie games, is that they do sort of at the same time though there's an interesting in my opinion there's like an interesting debate too within indie games where it's like it feels like we keep getting like the same 5 games or whatever, which I think is debatable, but I think it's only because of stuff like a lot of the boomer shooter stuff that have come out recently.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, because a lot of those boomer shooters games are indie games, so I think that sort of puts a negative perception of like we keep getting the same goddamn games from these people, because like it's always
because I'm immediately thinking of Mouse
PI, right?
And I finished that game. That was a good game. The story was a little was good, but like you had to really pay attention to what we were talking about.
Yeah, but then I think what else was there? I think I remember. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of boomer shooter like games that are also indie games, and so it's like a lot of people are just sort of like, we just keep I mean, granted, while Hades I don't think is a Hades is a good example of like a lot of roguelike games. A lot of these indie games are also roguelike games, where you got to go through the same.
There's been a lot of roguelike games
that are indie games,
Yeah.
So I think that's part of maybe the reason like we've gotten a bit of oversaturation in certain game genres, but I think that's because for some people, or at least for some developers, especially a lot of these indie game developers, those are kind of honestly like the easiest types of games to make that
And
give you a lot of replayability.
I was
You
gonna
know?
say also like, because now you got me thinking, like how often do you like how often do indie games actually get the recognition sometimes, you know? Because I remember having this conversation with a coworker. It was about the Game Awards about like, because you remember when Sifu was nominated for Fighting Game of the Year?
Yeah.
And it's like that doesn't make any sense. You have so many other which are all indies, but they never hit that, you know.
I think you are right on that because there are probably quite a few games that are probably would fill out certain awards or like even be more recognized, but they're indie games, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I guess that's probably why some people are saying like at least mixtape is probably like industry plant is probably the
Yeah.
word I guess I'm thinking about.
But you kind of don't want to use that word.
Yeah, because ultimately, again, it's like Annapurna has been doing these publishing things for games for a while now. Like
Yeah.
Journey was like 10 years ago.
And it still holds up.
Yeah, that's still a good game. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting again that we are kind of getting this debate now when I don't think anybody really cared as much back then.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's ultimately I think it's just sort of
It's a personal preference.
yeah, I think it's ultimately what it is. Is like people, I guess, see mixtape getting a lot of these good reviews or whatever. And I did look it up, by the way. IGN did give it like a 10 out of 10.
Mhm.
So I think that's partially probably what caused this whole mess to begin with.
And yet they
Um,
gave what Mouse PI like a 6.
I think yeah, because it was like too many cheese jokes.
It's like, god dang it,
Too much water.
too
So
much water.
7 out of 10.
Too much water. That's the point. You
Yeah,
fool.
yeah. But maybe that's sort of the main actual reason like people are on this bit, but ultimately I mean again it's you're just looking from the game. I think it's probably fine. I guess it's really more sort of like how much nostalgia bait are you looking for in this game or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think gosh, is there anything else to say? Because I think because at the end of the day I think it isn't it's a valid
Criticism.
criticism of like just how where do we draw the line at indie games and how do we talk about if a game is even like pretending to be an indie game? What do we do about that?
Yeah.
That sort of stuff, right? So it's not like people are like having negative criticisms or like wrong criticism. It's a very understanding viewpoint, and
Mhm.
ultimately it's kind of like the evolution of gaming as a whole at this point,
Yeah.
right? Like we are sort of starting to see maybe the transition from a lot of game people that are like we would consider indie, but now as the times are changing, like maybe they're not indie anymore, and now we got to find what is indie again, right?
Mhm. Yeah. It's also like, do you consider an indie game of a group of, as long as they have a certain number of people working on it, right?
Yeah, it's like it feels a bit too constrictive, right?
Yeah, because like Scott Cawthorn, like say whatever you want about him, but like it was like just one guy from what I know. Uh, but then you have Expedition 33, which is 30, which is like 32, 33, you know, in the 30s,
Yeah, it's
which is like that's small.
yeah compared to again your AAA studios, 30-ish people is a small team. Like again, like that by all
Yeah,
logic.
because like I immediately think of like 2XKO, which had 160, and then they cut it down to 80.
Yeah, but I guess with those multiplayer games and stuff like that have like a continuing service, they
Yeah.
do cut people,
Yep.
ultimately because it's like you don't need as many people to keep producing and maintaining the servers and stuff. But no, yeah, it's like yeah, like actually I think to myself like is Riot probably was indie back in the day, right?
Yeah.
When League of Legends first came out, and now I mean, dude, would you even consider Riot an indie studio? No, right?
They technically self-published their games.
Yeah, but now they make a bajillion dollars off of League of Legends.
Yeah.
and they got their own animated series, Arcane. So are they an indie publisher or studio now, or like when did it stop happening? Right? Like
Yeah, the lines have blurred a bit.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I guess it's ultimately it's a very interesting debate. I think ultimately it's gonna be up to I guess the consensus of people
Yeah.
out there just sort of like figure out like ultimately personally for me I think it's always going to be a vibes thing. Like
Yeah.
obviously it can't be like a third party publisher. I mean, heck,
If you can tell like a lot of money was put into it, it's probably not an indie.
yeah, like I mean EA has their EA Originals
Yeah.
stuff, which is them trying to promote like smaller studios. So you can kind of still consider that indie. I would think so, right? Like
Yeah.
what's his name, Joseph Franz?
Oh,
The crazy
fuck the Oscars.
yeah, the fuck the Oscars guy, right? Yeah, I think he's still an indie publisher. I mean, all those games are probably not like well known, but they still,
Yeah.
they have a reputation.
Yeah.
That didn't It Takes Two win Game of the Year one?
It did.
Yeah,
It
so
did.
so I don't know. Ultimately, yeah, it's an interesting discussion, interesting debate.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in my opinion, I guess mixtape kind of falls under maybe not indie anymore, like, but not like AAA. Ultimately,
Yeah.
that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I guess that's sort of I guess we're landing on, right?
Yeah. Just kind honestly, for me, it always kind of did feel like it depends on the person, because this kind of reminds me of the conversation I was doing at last year's Compalooza. There you go, another another pin on that. Where someone was talking about can comics or graphic novels be considered literature, and I'm like, well, it kind of depends on where you stand on that situation, right? Because like there are some like really well written graphic novels, but
Pictures.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Ultimately, that's gonna be like your folly, because like you can bring up something like Mouse, which is like
Yeah, good graphic novel. I
good graph,
read that in high school. Very good.
very good. But like you know, the guy leading the conversation was like he didn't really consider it like something like literature because of the way it's written, and it's like, well, that's well, yeah, because you're writing it in a different format to like a
To like an actual book.
yeah,
Yeah.
like he was using like The Great Gatsby,
Mm.
and like it kind of again for me it kind of does feel like it's more of like preference, right? Like not to say those aren't indies or those are high quality. It kind of falls under preference,
Yeah.
or in your words, vibes.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to put it into because like I have nothing else to say because I feel like we're gonna be talking in circles. But yeah, if you guys enjoy what you heard, just a reminder, we will be live at Palooza next week, so you probably won't see an episode for a while because we will be doing stuff. We'll be there on Friday. We're gonna be on the podcast pavilion at 3:15, and hope to see you guys there. Be sure to follow, come check us out. Be part of the discussion. Tell us some of your funny ones. If you have a reaction to some of the ones we brought up, let us know. But yeah, if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to follow us on all social media: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. On Instagram for on there, you'll find a podcast link tree to all the podcasts we're officially part of, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, all the like, and a link to the YouTube for our audio listeners out there who want to put a face to the voice. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and a Patreon for any form of support. And yeah, it's been me, your boy Eli.
Me, Joe.
The next time you see us, we'll be at Compalooza. Hope to see you guys there. And yeah, I guess have a good one. Peace.